My name is Victor Allen. For most of my life, people thought that name explained everything about me before I ever opened my mouth. It sounded solid, reliable, safe, the kind of name that came with polished shoes, steady returns, and a future already mapped out. No one ever stopped to ask what it felt like to carry it. I was 27 years old when the weight of that name finally became unbearable. The day my father died, the sky over Nebraska was clear and cruelly blue. No storm, no rain, just sunlight pouring down over land he had loved more deeply than anything else in this world. Pancreatic cancer doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, steals quickly, and leaves devastation behind like an apology that comes too late. I remember standing beside his hospital bed, holding a hand that had once lifted engines and turned stubborn soil into promise. His grip was weak, but his eyes were steady. "Take care of the land," he whispered. That was all. No speech, no dramatic final wisdom, just the thing that had defined his entire life. When he was gone, the world didn't pause for my grief. Lawyers arrived before silence could settle. Documents replaced condolences. Meetings were scheduled while the earth above his grave was still fresh. Allen Agri Holdings didn't mourn. It transferred. 6,000 acres of farmland stretched across the Midwest, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois. Cornfields that rolled like green oceans beneath open skies. Soybeans planted with mathematical precision. Silos that rose like quiet monuments to patience. Tractors equipped with GPS systems more advanced than most airplanes. My father had built all of it from almost nothing. After the war, when everyone else chased factories and cities, he stayed behind. He bought land no one wanted, soil people called stubborn, dry, unforgiving. He believed the earth remembered how it was treated. He believed patience was a kind of faith. Year by year, acre by acre, the land answered him. By the time I inherited it, Allen Agri Holdings supplied grain to corporations that fed millions of people I would never meet. Supermarket shelves filled quietly because of contracts my signature upheld. On paper, I was worth more money than I knew how to process. In real life, I felt hollow. At first, I told myself that loneliness was the price of success, that everyone at this level felt detached, that it was normal to sit in boardrooms with people who smiled too much and listened too carefully. I tried to live the life people expected of me. I went to charity galas in Chicago where crystal glasses clinked and laughter echoed off marble walls. I attended industry conferences in Omaha where men in tailored suits spoke about yields and margins like priests discussing scripture. Friends introduced me to women they insisted were perfect matches. They were beautiful, intelligent, accomplished, and none of them ever really saw me. There was Sophia, a marketing executive from Des Moines. We met at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The night air was warm, scented with expensive perfume and grilled steak. Candlelight flickered between us as traffic hummed far below, like a distant ocean. Halfway through appetizers, she leaned forward, resting her elbow lightly on the table. Her smile was practiced, polished, the kind people use in boardrooms. "Victor," she said softly, tracing the rim of her wine glass, "if we got serious, would I be able to co-sign on some of the properties, just for security?" I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. By dessert, she was discussing asset protection, prenups, and how her family's connections could help expand operations. She never asked what I loved, never asked what scared me, never asked how it felt to watch my father fade away in a hospital bed. I paid the bill politely. I never called her again. Then there was Elena. Sharp wit, stunning smile, a laugh that turned heads in crowded rooms. On our second date, we walked through a quiet park in Kansas City. Leaves crunched beneath our shoes as autumn settled in. Out of nowhere, she glanced sideways and asked casually, "So, private jet or just helicopters for farm tours?" It felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine. She wasn't asking about my life, she was assessing my worth. That's when the pattern became undeniable. They didn't want Victor. They wanted the future attached to my last name. After that, I began withdrawing long before I physically disappeared. I skipped galas, declined invitations, let assistants attend meetings I once led myself. I retreated into my house on the outskirts of Lincoln, a sprawling place with high ceilings, wide hallways, and too much silence. At night, I wandered from room to room, my footsteps echoing. I stopped often in front of the mantel where old family photographs rested. My father, grinning beside a tractor, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands. My mother, gone too early, holding me as a baby. They had built everything with love. And here I was, surrounded by it all, feeling completely alone. One night, standing there in the quiet, something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of truth. What good is all of this if it poisons every human connection I try to make? The thought didn't scare me. It felt like relief. That's when the idea came. Disappear. Not forever, just long enough to find out if someone could care about me without the money, without the power, without the name that preceded me everywhere I went. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just sat with the idea, turning it slowly, carefully, like something fragile. The more I thought about it, the more it felt inevitable. I told the board I was taking a sabbatical for personal growth. They accepted without question. After all, I owns the company. I built a new identity piece by piece. Gus Harland. 27 years old. Drifter. No family ties. No fixed address. A vague history of odd jobs and bad luck. Just enough to sound believable, not enough to invite curiosity. I bought clothes from thrift stores. Faded jeans, worn flannel shirts, scuffed boots. I grew my beard out, cut my hair shorter, practiced slouching, learning to make myself smaller. No credit cards, cash only. A burner phone. Once a week, I checked in with my assistant through encrypted email, just enough to ensure the empire didn't crumble without me. Then I packed a single duffel bag. As I locked the front door of that massive house for the last time, I didn't feel fear. I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't Victor Allen. I was no one. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, that felt like freedom. The first thing I learned as Gus Harland was how loud silence can be when you are no longer important to anyone. Miller Family Farm sat at the end of a gravel road that disappeared into fields so wide they made the sky feel closer. There were no gates, no security cameras, no polished stone pillars, just weathered wood, rusted hinges, and land that looked tired in a way only farmers recognize. It reminded me of my father's early years, but here the tiredness felt different, heavier, desperate. Mr. Miller was a broad man in his 50s with hands like split oak and eyes that rarely softened. He showed me my quarters without ceremony, a converted shed behind the main barn. Inside was a narrow cot, a single lamp, and walls thin enough that the wind whispered through them at night. "Bathrooms in the house," he grunted. "Meals at dawn, noon, and dusk. Don't be late." That was it. No welcome, no curiosity. I wasn't offended. I was relieved. The work started before the sun. I woke to the distant crow of a rooster and the ache of muscles I didn't know I had yet. I pulled on my boots, stepped into the cool morning air, and followed instructions barked without eye contact. Fence mending, feed hauling, equipment cleaning, digging irrigation trenches by hand when machines failed. This wasn't the managed labor I was used to. No air-conditioned tractor cabins, no GPS guidance, no supervisors checking progress on tablets. This was raw, physical, honest. By the third day, blisters covered my palms, dust coated my lungs, my back burned constantly. At night, I collapsed onto the cot, wrapped myself in a wool blanket that smelled faintly of mothballs, and listened to mice scurry across the floorboards. No heat, no comfort, and somehow, it felt right. The Millers treated me like temporary labor. Mr. Miller issued commands without looking at me, as if I were another piece of equipment. Mrs. Miller's eyes carried a constant sharpness, her mouth always ready with criticism about meals, messes, weather, anything that could be controlled by complaining. Their older children were already grown, 2 sons in their 30s who helped when they felt like it, and a daughter who handled bookkeeping and spoke with thinly veiled irritation whenever she addressed me. I heard them laughing in the barn once. "How long you think the drifter lasts?" "Till payday." "Oh wait, he ain't getting paid." I kept my head down. That was the deal. I was invisible. Until Emily. I noticed her late in the afternoon on my second day. She stood near the house, stirring a pot over an outdoor burner, sleeves frayed, hair tied back with a plain rubber band. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as if she'd learned long ago that mistakes were expensive. Mrs. Miller stormed toward her, face red. "You ruined it again. Do you have any idea how much fruit that cost?" Emily didn't argue. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't defend herself. "I'm sorry, I'll start over," she said quietly. Something about the way she accepted the blame, so easily, so completely, made my chest tighten. She wasn't hired help. She was family. And yet she was treated like she didn't belong. Over the next few days, I watched her quietly carry the farm on her back, cooking meals, cleaning the house, bottling jam late into the night, fixing small mistakes no one else noticed until they became problems. Criticism followed her like a shadow. "Can't you do anything right? Why are you always underfoot? Go make yourself useful." She never raised her voice. She never fought back. That night, after 12 straight hours of labor, I dragged myself back to the shed, too tired to eat. My hands shook as I sat on the cot, staring at the wall. A soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, Emily stood there, holding a folded towel and a tin plate wrapped in foil. "I thought you might need this," she said. Inside was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a slice of apple pie. No one else had noticed I'd skipped dinner. "You looked worn out today," she added quietly. "Have you eaten?" I shook my head. She handed me the plate. Our fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. "The shed gets cold," she said. "If you need another blanket, I can get one." It wasn't pity, it was care. That night, after the farm went quiet, we sat on the back steps under the stars. Fireflies flickered in the fields. Crickets filled the air with steady music. We talked about nothing at first. Weather, crops, how stubborn the cows were. Then slowly she began to open. "You ever feel like you're just extra?" she asked one night, hugging her knees. "Like if you vanished, things would just keep going." Her voice was soft, careful, like she'd learned not to take up too much space. She told me how she was born during a bad year, how her parents argued constantly back then, how her mother always said she was the surprise that tipped everything into chaos. "My brothers are the future, my sister's the smart one, and me, I mess things up." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. She told me about dreams she'd never shared out loud. "I want to see the ocean," she whispered one night, eyes shining. "The real one. Waves, salt air, maybe a lighthouse." She laughed softly after, embarrassed. "Sounds silly, doesn't it?" It didn't. I carved her a lighthouse from an old fence post with a pocket knife. It took a week. My fingers ached. The lines weren't perfect. When I gave it to her, wrapped in newspaper, her hands trembled. "You remembered," she whispered. She cried. And when she hugged me, brief, fierce, grateful, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't testing hearts. I was falling in love with a woman who saw me when I was nothing, and I had no idea what that love was about to cost us both. The farm grew quieter, but not in the peaceful way it had before. The silence felt tight, stretched thin, like a rope pulled too far. Meals were shorter. Voices dropped when I entered rooms. Doors closed more often. Something was wrong. Mr. Miller's temper sharpened. Mrs. Miller snapped at everyone, especially Emily. The criticism that had once been constant became crueler, more pointed, as if she were pushing something toward a breaking point. Emily started disappearing earlier in the evenings. Our talks on the porch became shorter. Some nights she didn't come at all. When I asked casually where she'd gone, one of the brothers shrugged. Who knows with her? Probably hiding. But the unease settled in my chest like a stone. One night, as I was heading back to the shed after repairing a broken gate, voices spilled through an open window of the main house. I hadn't meant to listen, I truly hadn't. But then I heard Emily's name, and I stopped. "We're out of time," Mr. Miller said, his voice strained. "Blake wants his money." "That land won't cover it," Mrs. Miller replied coldly, "and you know it." "So what are you suggesting?" the daughter asked, hesitant. Mrs. Miller didn't hesitate. "We use what we have." There was a pause, a long one. "Emily's no use here anyway," she continued. "Always has been. Blake's been asking about her for months. He'll clear the debt if we arrange it." My blood turned to ice. "Arrange what?" the daughter whispered. "Marriage," Mrs. Miller snapped. "She'll be taken care of, and we keep the farm." The word marriage echoed in my skull like a gunshot. Howard Blake. Everyone in the county knew that name. A man in his 60s who owned processing plants and distribution lines that strangled small farms into submission. A man with money, power, and a history of wives who disappeared quietly from his life. Emily wasn't being married. She was being sold. My hands shook as footsteps approached inside the house. I backed away into the darkness, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I told myself to think, to slow down. But then I heard her scream, "No, please, Dad!" I ran. The yard was lit by headlights. A black SUV idled near the drive. Howard Blake stood beside it, thick-set, expensive suit straining against his body, cigar clamped between his teeth like punctuation. Mr. Miller was gripping Emily's arm, dragging her toward the open door. She was crying, fighting, barely holding herself together. "Gus," she screamed when she saw me, "please, help me." Time collapsed. I didn't think. I moved. One of the hired hands stepped in front of me, shoving me back. "Stay out of it, drifter." I swung. My fist connected with his jaw. He staggered. I pushed past him and grabbed Mr. Miller's wrist, twisting hard. He yelped and released her. Emily stumbled into me, shaking, her nails digging into my arm like she was afraid I might vanish. Howard Blake chuckled darkly. "Well now, that's cute." I didn't answer. I scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing and ran. Someone shouted behind us. I didn't look back. I reached my old pickup, threw her into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine roared to life like it had been waiting for this moment. Gravel sprayed as we tore down the road. Emily sobbed beside me, her breath hitching. "Where are we going? He'll find us. He owns everything." "Somewhere safe," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "My place." We drove for hours. The road stretched long and dark beneath the stars. At some point, exhaustion claimed her. She slept curled against the door, trusting me with a faith I didn't deserve. When we reached the outskirts of Lincoln, the world changed. Iron gates rose ahead of us, stone pillars, lights, guards. I pressed the remote. The gates opened smoothly. Emily stirred. She sat up slowly as we passed manicured lawns and a house that glowed warmly against the night. "Gus," she whispered, "whose house is this?" I parked. turned off the engine, and finally faced the truth I'd been running from. "It's mine," I said. She stared at me. I helped her inside, bandaged the scrape on her arm, and then, standing in my kitchen, beneath the weight of everything, I told her the truth. My name is Victor Allen. I told her about the empire, the inheritance, the loneliness, the lie. I told her the only thing that wasn't fake was how I felt about her. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she looked down at her hands. Then she spoke. "Do you know what it feels like to be traded? Like an object?" Her voice didn't shake. "My whole life," she said, "I've been blamed for existing. Tonight, they decided I was useful for the first time." She cried then, quietly, completely. I held her, and for the first time in years, I cried too. Not because I'd been caught, but because I finally understood what love costs. I asked her to marry me without a ring, without promises of wealth. "Choose me," I said. "Not my name, not my money, just me." She said yes. The wedding was simple. She walked down the aisle alone, strong, steady, chosen. When her family showed up, I drew the line. She is not a burden. She never was. They left. Emily exhaled. Months later, we stood by the ocean she dreamed of for years. Waves crashed. Wind tangled her hair. She placed my hand on her stomach. "I think family," she said, softly, "is where someone chooses to stay." I held her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't disappear.